Yeah, Mike, thanks very much for joining me from Hadean to talk about scalability. I really appreciate you making time, of course, to go through a few questions. I just wondered if you could give me a summary of, how you think about the problem of scalability and, what it means for Hadean.
Yeah, certainly. So I guess we're an engineering company that's focused on distributed computing, but principally we are focused on how we can enable this next iteration of the web. It goes by different names:
Yeah.
Web 3.0, the spatial internet, the web, the metaverse. And I think for us, it's looking at it as a logical progression, right? So if you looked at Web 2.0, the preceding period in the early 2000s, that was kind of governed and driven by mobile, social, and the proliferation of cloud technologies. What we're seeing now is kind of a shift based on the emergence of edge technologies, decentralized data networks, and the increased opportunities that are driven by AI. So basically, that's a long way of saying that there's kind of an inherent trajectory here. So on one axis, you've got just an increasing volume and velocity of data. So I think it's something like in 2025, there's going to be 160 times more data that was produced and consumed than in 2010, right? That's its own inherent kettle of fish that we need to tackle in some way, shape, or form. But the other kind of property of this new era, I suppose, of the internet is kind of the interoperability. So Web 3.0, or the metaverse as it's colloquially known, it's all about kind of reducing the interface between the physical and digital world. And what that means is kind of you've got a bunch of different applications. How do people traverse across them? How do people interact in a digital layer that speaks to their physical interactions and vice versa? So I think you've kind of got that one piece, which is just the nuts and bolts of, all right, there's a hell of a lot of data flying around. How are we tackling that problem? But then the other side of it is, how do all of these pieces fit together, and how do we approach scalability in a harmonious way when there are all these new moving pieces kind of clicking into place?
Yeah, and that's a really succinct explanation, really, of the complexity of the issue. I spoke with RP1's Sean Mann, also, who are kind of working on scalability, and it just kind of bowled me over that there's people like yourselves actually doing this and actually kind of working at that, forefront of such a complex but such a necessary problem. And I wonder what makes Hadean's solution to the problem, or how you're going about it. What's unique about it?
Yeah, so I think when we formed the company 5 years ago, we came from a whole bunch of different walks of life. So I'd previously worked for a long time in programmatic ad tech. We've got founders that came from the DevOps and automation space. Our CTO and technical co-founder was one of the founding members of the Rust programming language. And I guess basically the unifying factor was we'd all felt the pain point of working with applications at scale. So I guess philosophically, we started from a point where if you swept everything away, if you just had a blank sheet of paper, what's the best way to approach scalability from the ground up? And for us, that was about developing a technology that allowed anyone to write, build, deploy an application that was distributed by default. So what you kind of see today is, especially coming out of the, this isn't something that's happening in vacuum. Obviously, there's a lot of inertia from things that have been built before, but what you're currently seeing is applications and technology stacks that have been built in a particular paradigm that's kind of reaching the edge of its capabilities. And we're just trying to see what's the extra mile that we can squeeze out of that? What if we add this extra component onto it? Can we squeeze out some additional resource or capability to scale things a bit further? Now that kind of has a number of downsides in terms of, reliability, performance issues, security risks. Oftentimes things crash and it becomes a matter of finding needles in many different haystacks. And that was kind of that was kind of our personal histories when we founded Hadean. So for us, Hadean's differentiating factor is when you write an application on Hadean, it's inherently geared to scale to thousands of different cores, servers, to deploy across any number of a universe of any number of different connected devices, to be able to service people in different geographic locales. That's all stuff that kind of comes out of the box. So for us, it was almost a selfish desire of how can we get rid of all of those pain points that we've ran into all these many times. So that's kind of our take on it, Mohan.
Kind of scratching your own itch, I suppose, when, if you run into that problem again and again, you're like, well, somebody needs to fix this, so might as well be us. Thank
Absolutely.
you and what is the panel about that you'll be talking on, Mike? Do you have, and is there any message you'd like people to take away about the metaverse from your talk at the upcoming conference?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to participate on the panel titled Tackling Scalability, Interoperability, and the Open Metaverse. And I'm lucky to be on the panel with some other esteemed speakers as well. So I'm really looking forward to it as well. But I think the takeout for us is it's about the interesting opportunities that are coming out of the metaverse. I know as a buzzword, it's a scary gargantuan piece, or it can feel that way. But from our perspective, it's kind of a logical progression of the behaviors that we see right now, right? And I think for us, and what I'm really looking forward to about the discussion is, there's a technical problem, but ultimately what we're talking about is how can we enable people to have, one, to be more empowered when it comes to the content that they create and interact with, two, to have a greater sense of trust where, in terms of information security, but also in terms of kind of the things we read and see and hear today. But it's also about just how can we open things up in a healthy, constructive way? How can we empower anyone, whether it's a particular business in a sector, or if it's just a hobbyist at home who's just looking to interact or build something cool? How can we uniformly empower all of these different users? So that's what I'm really looking forward to dig into on the panel.
Amazing. That's going to be very exciting. As I was saying, I spoke with Sean as well. He's really looking forward to the panel, and there's going to be some amazing other speakers on it. So I feel like a lot of sparks are going to fly in terms of the ideas and the kind of, definitely I'll learn something from it anyway, because I don't know that much, but
I'll be right there with you. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited to be with folks like Sean. And you're absolutely right. I think it'll be a healthy and engaging conversation.
100%. And thank you very much for your time, Mike. I look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Likewise.